She shot me a contemptuous glance and said, "We don't need outdated old men like you holding us back," flipping her hair with a cold indifference, as if getting rid of me was just another item to check off her to-do list. My name is Stanley Rowe. I'm 59 years old, and for the past 18 years, I've served as the operations manager at Harper Machinery, a leading industrial equipment manufacturer based in Indianapolis. I was never the loud voice in meetings, never one to demand the spotlight. I was the quiet force that kept everything running smoothly, the man behind the curtain making sure half the Midwest's factories didn't come to a grinding halt. Faced with Vanessa's dismissal, I simply gave a faint, sarcastic smile, nodded once, and walked out of her office. No arguments. No drama. Just the silence of a storm that's learned to endure. As I quietly cleaned out my desk, the younger employees avoided my gaze. Some of them had come in as teenagers, nervous, unsure, and now stood as adults with families of their own. I had trained each one of them, guided them through mistakes, mentored them through growth. And yet, no one said a word as I packed nearly 2 decades of my life into a simple cardboard box. Charles Harper, the founder of the company, had built this business from a single lathe in his garage 43 years ago. With sweat, determination, and a reputation for machines that never failed, he turned it into a $30 million enterprise respected across the Midwest. When his health began to fail, he handpicked me to oversee operations. "You're the only one I trust not to take shortcuts," he once told me. But times had changed. Vanessa, his 28-year-old daughter, fresh from 2 years in Miami and full of ambition, returned with visions of reform and a hunger for modern thinking. She had no idea my contract contained a very specific clause, a tiny line of text she had brushed past in her rush to reinvent. As I walked toward my old pickup truck, carrying the modest box of belongings, I felt no anger, no bitterness. Just a strange and calming stillness, like the peace that follows a long, hard storm. It was a clause Charles had personally insisted on including, one that nearly everyone else had overlooked, but it was written plainly: if I were terminated without just cause, the company would owe me a severance package equal to 2 full years' salary. No one on the new leadership team had bothered to read the fine print. But I never forgot it. I sat in the driver's seat for a few quiet moments, my hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the production floor through the dusty windshield. I could still see the machines I had once tightened bolts on, the systems I had designed from scratch, the employees I had carefully chosen and trained. And now, all of it was about to face the reality of what happens when institutional knowledge simply walks out the door. There was no need to slam the door or hurl bitter words as I left the parking lot. I just turned the key, shifted into drive, and headed home, where I would make a call to Harold Preston, a longtime friend and lawyer who had been waiting years for the chance to take on a corporate case like this. I was never the flashy type. I had been married to my wife Linda for 29 years before she passed away 4 years ago. I raised 2 children who had both found their own way. My son worked for an engineering firm in Denver, and my daughter taught 3rd grade in Cleveland. My life had been built on stability and trust, the very same principles I had poured into Harper Machinery, one day at a time, for 18 years. In many ways, Charles Harper was the father figure I never truly had, as my own father had disappeared when I was 11, leaving my mother to raise 3 boys on a secretary's salary. Charles had taken a chance on me when I was 41, coming off a layoff from a dying automotive plant with nothing but hands-on experience and a community college degree in mechanical engineering. During my interview, Charles had stated that credentials do not build machines, rather, men with sense and skill do. He had promoted me to operations manager within 2 years. Charles and I were not the type to go fishing together or hit the bar after work, but there was a respect between us that transcended the workplace. When Linda fell ill, he had been the one to rearrange my schedule without my asking, ensuring that I could attend every treatment. Family comes first, Stanley. The first warning sign occurred approximately a year ago when Vanessa began attending meetings, fresh out of business school, with a leather portfolio and a trail of expensive perfume, discussing synergy and market disruption. I occasionally observed Charles wince at her proposals, which would have undermined our quality control or outsourced components that we had always manufactured in-house. However, he never publicly contradicted her, rather, he quietly rectified the situation. She must learn, he informed me one afternoon, leaning against the doorframe of my office. Some lessons cannot be learned from books. The second warning was when Charles announced his retirement 3 months ago. He claimed that it was due to heart problems, but I suspected that it was more a result of giving in to Vanessa's pressure. He appeared defeated when he presented me with the updated organization chart, which featured Vanessa's name at the top. I made her promise to maintain the core team, he had stated, his eyes not quite meeting mine. The experience you all possess is what makes this organization function. I simply nodded, but a sensation in my gut tightened. I was reviewing my employment contract with Harold at my kitchen table the morning after my termination when my phone rang. Charles's name illuminated the screen. He would not look directly at me, as if he knew what was about to happen but was unable to express it. I nearly declined to respond, but 18 years of respect do not dissipate overnight. Stanley's voice was strained. What transpired yesterday? I replied, maintaining a neutral tone and not expressing anger, ask your daughter. I did. She stated that you were, he hesitated, searching for words, resistant to the new direction, and said you were undermining her authority with the floor team. I was silent, allowing the silence to extend between us. Charles knew me better than that, he was aware that I would never undermine anyone. He ultimately inquired, are you planning to file? I replied, yes, I have already done so. Harold Preston is currently responsible for the matter. Charles exhaled deeply. I advised her to review the contracts and informed her that there were safeguards in place prior to my departure. Another pause. She stated that she had cleaned the house yesterday. This includes you, Thomas, Jennifer, and anyone over the age of 50. I felt my jaw clench. Thomas had served as our chief of engineering for 12 years, and Jennifer managed the quality control lab as if it were her own personal kingdom. Both individuals were indispensable in their own right. Charles, was that the direction you intended? Eliminating all those who contributed to the establishment? You are aware that it is not, he replied, his voice sagging. However, I relinquished control to her, and she is now responsible for its operation. The call abruptly concluded, and I could hear voices in the background on his end. One of the voices was clearly Vanessa's, with a sharp and demanding quality. Charles swiftly stated, I must leave. I placed the phone down and gazed at the contract that was sprawled across the table. Section 12, Paragraph 3 stated that in the event of termination without documented cause, as defined in Appendix C, the employee shall be entitled to severance compensation equivalent to 24 months of current salary. Harold had indicated that it was impenetrable. He had previously informed me that it was. They will either pay or we will pursue them in court, where we will prevail, and they will bear my legal expenses. The maple tree that Linda and I had planted when we first moved in 26 years ago now towered over the property. We had nurtured it through 2 lightning strikes and a disease that nearly killed it. I walked to the window that overlooked my backyard. Repaired it, provided it with the necessary resources, and encouraged it to flourish. I felt a change within me, this was no longer solely about money, it was about value. Regarding acknowledging the value of experience and the respect for the foundation that others established prior to the decision to renovate the home, I contacted Thomas and Jennifer. By noon, I had conversed with each veteran employee that Vanessa had terminated. Some were astounded, while others were enraged. They were all concerned about their futures. I advised them to examine their contracts and contact Harold. Additionally, I advised them to take a deep breath. I then made one final call to Douglas Klein, the proprietor of Precision Parts, which is located across town. Klein had been attempting to recruit me from Harper for several years. I remain intrigued by the conversation and inquired about it. I was seated in a downtown office with Harper Machinery's corporate attorney and Vanessa, 3 days after being terminated. Harold Preston was beside me, his weathered briefcase open, and my contract was conspicuously displayed. Vanessa, without even examining the document, remarked, "This is absolutely ridiculous." Harold, 67, with the patient demeanor of a man who had seen every corporate trick, merely pointed to the highlighted clause. "We are implementing a new direction. That is sufficient cause." The corporate counsel, a young man named Justin who appeared to have recently graduated from law school, scanned the contract with increasing discomfort. Termination without cause, as defined in Appendix C, necessitates severance equivalent to 24 months' salary, which in Mr. Rowe's case amounted to approximately $320,000. Vanessa interrupted, crossing her arms. "That's insubordination, Ms. Harper. The definition of cause is quite specific. Performance issues, ethical violations, criminal acts." He was resistant to change. Harold inquired about the documentation, which was absent. He was seeking written warnings and performance improvement plans, as Appendix C necessitates a documented pattern rather than a single instance. Justin perused a thin folder in front of him, but he was unable to locate anything. Vanessa's expression became tense. "That is acceptable. Therefore, we will provide him with a few months of severance and proceed with our plans." Harold rectified the situation, stating that it was 24 months as previously agreed upon. She quickly responded, "That is absurd. We will extend the offer for 6 months. You may accept it or decline." I maintained my silence, observing her. She reminded me of her father at that moment, with the same stubbornness in her jaw. However, Charles's stubbornness had always been in service of building something, while hers appeared to be targeted at tearing down. "Harold will close his briefcase, and we will then proceed with legal action. The discovery process will be particularly intriguing, particularly in relation to the concurrent termination of multiple employees over the age of 50. Justin's eyes widened slightly as he leaned toward Vanessa and murmured something urgent. She brushed him off. Vanessa stated to me, entirely disregarding Harold, "Before you issue threats, you should be aware that we are prepared to litigate this matter. You will be ensnared in court for years." I eventually spoke. "I have the time. Additionally, we will inform the industry that you are difficult." That was the moment her father appeared in the doorway. I had not seen Charles since his retirement party. "Good success in securing another position at your age." He appeared paler and thinner, but his eyes were as keen as ever. "Vanessa," he said quietly. "A word. Dad, we are currently engaged in an activity. This is not a request." They exited the conference room and, through the glass wall, I observed them in dispute. Vanessa's posture became increasingly defensive as Charles gesticulated emphatically. Upon their return, Vanessa refused to acknowledge me. Charles instructed Justin to draft the severance agreement in accordance with the terms of the contract. "I apologize, Stanley." Charles turned to me and said, "Not now, Dad." Vanessa began. This is not the manner in which I desired to conclude the conversation. I nodded once, and there was no further discussion required between us. Vanessa preceded me as Harold and I prepared to depart. "This is not the conclusion, I will be conducting an assessment of all vendor relationships." Harper's words caused Charles to pale, but he did not respond. I continued to assent, reflecting on my conversation with Douglas Klein the previous day. Regarding the partnership offer he had extended and the niche market that Precision Parts was on the brink of entering, I informed her that you are correct in one respect. The situation is not yet concluded. The severance payment, which was $320,000 minus taxes, was deposited into my account 1 week later. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt numb. I had never seen so much money at once. The focus was not on money or revenge, rather, it was on a more profound issue. On the same afternoon, I encountered Thomas Baldwin, our former head of engineering, at a diner that was situated midway between our residences. The establishment was nearly deserted at 3 o'clock, with only a few truckers at the counter and us occupying a back booth. Harold said, stirring his coffee without drinking it, I received a year's severance. While it was not as generous as your offer, it was still better than nothing. Thomas nodded in agreement. He was prohibited from discussing proprietary processes or business practices for the next 5 years. He then let out a bitter snicker. I have been in the field of engineering for 40 years, and I am now unable to discuss my own work. Are you the one who signed it? I do not see many alternatives. I have a granddaughter who will be attending college next year. I pushed a business card across the table, identifying it as Precision Parts Douglas Klein. I informed him that he was considering hiring a consultant. A person who comprehends precision hydraulics. No NDA is necessary. Thomas gazed at the card. Harper would file a lawsuit against me if I adopted this approach. However, this is not the case if you are merely providing guidance on industry standards, as there is nothing proprietary about that. He gently tucked the card into his pocket. Stanley, what is the matter? This is not typical of you, stirring the pot. I had not yet disclosed my agreement with Douglas to anyone. However, Thomas was entitled to be informed. We had collaborated for more than a decade. I announced discreetly, I am aligning with Precision. Douglas has invited me to lead a new division that specializes in hydraulic components. Vanessa believes that the small batch, high-margin things is a waste of time. Thomas raised his eyebrows. Charles had consistently stated that Harper's future lay in custom work. Vanessa is succeeding in her efforts to concentrate on mass production. Thomas bluntly stated that she is naive in her belief that she can compete with overseas manufacturers on price. This is due to the reality that our labor costs are too high. Charles and I are aware of this. Thomas leaned forward. Is that the reason you are informing me? Do you believe Charles is somehow involved? I shook my head. No, but I had lunch with Jennifer yesterday, and she mentioned that Vanessa has been liquidating equipment. Charles acquired the specialized machinery for the custom work last year. She has already sold half of it. Thomas's eyes widened as he realized that the equipment was worth more than $2 million. Thomas sat back, his comprehension registering. She is stripping the company, converting assets to cash, at auction prices. They likely received 30 cents on the dollar. I acknowledged. And guess who has been purchasing property in Miami? Jesus. Thomas placed his hand over his face. Is Charles aware? I doubt it. He established that organization with the intention of preserving its legacy, not for liquidation. We remained in silence for a brief period, contemplating the implications of this. Thomas finally inquired, what are you going to do, not only for us, but also for the 100 or so personnel who remain at Harper, and for Charles's life's work? I merely stated, create something that is superior. Something that is respectful of both the past and the future. Thomas appeared skeptical. Specifically, Douglas Klein. Douglas is merely an investor who is 2 years away from retirement. He intends to provide support to individuals who possess the necessary expertise, and subsequently withdraw his support. And may I assume that you require an engineer who is proficient in hydraulics? I smiled for the first time in weeks. The position is yours if you desire it. Provided that your NDA is restricted to proprietary information rather than general knowledge. Thomas examined me. This is not merely a commercial matter for you, is it? It is personal. It is about value, I stated. I have always been passionate about constructing something that endures. 2 months after my termination, I sat in Douglas Klein's office, examining the architectural plans for the new facility. Thomas had proposed the name for our new venture, which specializes in custom hydraulic components, and it was a converted warehouse on the east side. He had stated that we should build from the corners up. Douglas, a barrel-chested man with a full white beard and perpetually rolled-up sleeves, spread the supplier contracts across his desk. He said that machine shops had verified the contracts. This is how you create something that lasts. The initial 5 units can be delivered by the end of the month. The CNC programmer will commence work on Monday. Douglas gave me a knowing glance. Former Harper employee, Jason Wright, stated that you recommended us. I nodded in agreement. Wright had been employed at Harper for 6 years, was gifted in computer modeling, and was unjustly underpaid. Vanessa had reduced the budget of his department by 30% and increased her own salary. He had resigned 2 weeks prior. Douglas inquired as to the current number. Douglas whistled low. I responded with 7. All of them were top performers. Harper is rapidly losing talent. I stated that individuals are inclined to follow effective leadership, but Vanessa is not demonstrating it. I received a text message from Jennifer, who is currently employed in Harper's laboratory but is providing me with information. She is unable to depart, as her retirement is 3 years away. However, she could surely maintain her alertness. The message included a photograph of an internal memo, specifically referencing production delays. Douglas adjusted his reading spectacles to improve his vision after I presented him with the quality control issues. 3 significant clients have threatened to withdraw their contracts due to missed deadlines. He stated that the brain drain is already affecting output, as we had anticipated. I stowed my phone, feeling no gratification in the news. Harper employed families that I had known for years, including those with mortgages, children in college, and parents in nursing homes. My objective was not to alleviate their distress. I suggested that we contact Midwest Manufacturing, one of Harper's largest clients, and inform them that we will be operational in 60 days. Douglas nodded and took note. The purchasing manager is enthusiastic about discussing the upcoming week's meeting. I proceeded to the window, which provided a view of the warehouse floor. The initial apparatus was being installed by workers, forming the foundation of a new entity that was founded on a combination of innovation and respect for experience. Charles Harper's name appeared on the screen when my phone called. I advised Douglas to take it, and he nodded and exited the room, closing the door behind him. I responded, Charles. Stanley's voice appeared fatigued. Defeated. I am attentive. We must converse. I am aware of the new company. A heavy groan. The Harper employees you are recruiting are departing. I did not make any statements, it was not unlawful. It was not even unethical, it was simply business. Charles continued, I am not calling to request that you cease. I am contacting you to request your assistance. This caught me off guard. What type of assistance do you require? He hesitated before responding, the kind that could potentially save the remnants of my company. Vanessa has been disposing of assets and compromising on quality. The board is apprehensive, as am I. Why inform me of this? Because you are the sole individual who is aware of every aspect of the operation. Another pause. And because I should have heeded your warning months ago that she was not prepared. The sole individual who may have identified a path forward. I closed my eyes and reflected on the years I spent working alongside Charles, creating a product that we were both proud of. Something that employed hundreds of individuals who relied on us to make sound decisions. Charles, what is the specific question you are asking? Please visit my home tonight. 7. If Thomas is amenable, please bring him. The board is interested in convening to deliberate. Yes. Options. Charles's voice experienced a minor increase in volume, which coincided with a shift in leadership. I once more gazed downward at the warehouse floor. I ultimately promised to be present at our small but expanding operation, where I had been constructing the future from the ruins of betrayal. I will be there, but I am not making any guarantees. Fair enough. His voice was tinged with relief. Stanley? Yes. Thank you. Vanessa was at the head of the table, flanked by her new executive team, as the quarterly all-hands meeting was just beginning. I was in the rear of Harper Machinery's main conference room, 6 months after being fired. The majority of the attendees were under the age of 35 and appeared to be uneasy. I had been instructed to refrain from speaking until the conclusion, as this had been the board's agreement. Allow Vanessa to present her quarterly results first. Allow her to elucidate the 37% decrease in revenue, the lost contracts, and the quality control failures. She was midway through a presentation when she observed me, attributing the problem to market conditions and legacy inefficiencies. She pointed at me and demanded to know what Charles was doing. Charles, who was seated quietly among the board members, nodded to the chairman who was standing. The chairman responded, Vanessa. The board has made a decision regarding the company's leadership. Her expression turned pale. You cannot be serious. The chairman, Stanley, continued, turning to me. Would you like to provide an explanation of the new arrangement? I stepped forward, holding a folder that Harold had prepared for my severance 6 months prior, but this one contained significantly different contents. I announced that Harper Machinery and Cornerstone Precision were merging, maintaining my composure. The acquisition agreement was approved by the board this morning, prompting Vanessa to guffaw violently. No, Charles stated, standing slowly. I am the dominant shareholder. This is absurd. I held 51%, which I have now voted in favor of the merger. You hold 20%. I slid the folder across the table to her. Harper's Custom Hydraulics division will be absorbed by Cornerstone, while the remaining operations will be overseen by new leadership. Thomas, who entered from the doorway, stated, my leadership. Vanessa perused the documents with trembling hands. This is business, she stated. I completed it for her. Nothing personal. A year after the merger, I stood in the expanded production facility, which now housed both Cornerstone Precision and Harper Custom Hydraulics. The rhythm of machinery created a symphony of productivity that I had missed during my months away, as workers moved efficiently between stations. Charles joined me on the observation platform, leaning heavily on his cane. His health had not improved, but his spirit had. Witnessing the company's resurgence had been the most effective treatment. He presented me with the quarterly numbers. I nodded, perusing the figures. Profit margins had increased for the first time in 5 years. Yesterday, Vanessa contacted Charles, who responded discreetly. Additionally, 3 new patents were filed, and employee retention remained stable. After the merger, she had taken her settlement and vanished. I raised an eyebrow, but I did not say anything. She was from Miami. He reiterated that she is establishing a consulting firm and inquired whether I would be interested in investing. There were no farewell or apologies. Charles shook his head. He advised her to return to Indianapolis and acquire a comprehensive understanding of the business. In the manner in which I did it. In the manner in which you did it. And. He smiled regretfully as she hung up. However, she called back this morning to inquire whether the offer was still valid. I observed Jason instructing 2 new programmers on our most recent system in the vicinity. Jennifer, dressed in her lab coat, meticulously examined components. Thomas, at a workstation, manually sketched a design modification before transferring it to the computer. Charles mentioned that when I drafted the severance clause in your contract, I had no idea how it would unfold. Rather than being in opposition, they are collaborating to create something more robust. I smiled, and neither did I. We observed the company we had both contributed to expanding in a state of tranquility. Certain teachings are costly. However, the ones that endure, the ones that alter our perspective on the world, are always worth the cost.